Welcome to part three of a series of conversations that I started a few sessions ago, and one that I hope perhaps will last for a few more sessions. In the previous session, covered something that I titled Drudgery and Broken Dreams. Today, I have a topic title which I have called Navigating the Path. This is all about OnlyFans and the new phenomenon. Let me preface today's conversation, as I have done in the previous sessions, by making it very clear this is not a bash fest. This is not an attack on one party or the other. At the core, what I am hoping to do is provide some ideas that women, generally speaking, can and could consider in order to make sure that they make the right choices and decisions for themselves, whatever that choice might be. I think in my inner self, I consider myself to be a feminist. By that, I should define what feminism, in my perspective, in its original classical meaning, was all about. It was about choice. It was about female choice, the right and the freedom to choose what a woman wants to do. OnlyFans offers women an opportunity to choose, and on that basis, I think women, generally speaking, are making a choice. Now, whether you are a man or a woman, and whether you disagree with that choice, you have to accept that as a free thinking person, as someone with free will, and as someone with the ability to choose, whether the choice is to your taste or liking, people have the right to choose. And on that basis, I started to think about how I could respect the choices people are making, whilst at the same time providing an opportunity for ideas and thoughts that could help those who want to make the same choice make, I would consider, a better long-term decision or choice, but more specifically, have a better strategy. Now, in today's session, let me go back and start with something that I consider to be at the core of a conversation that I think some people will connect with. If I go back to the books of antiquities, one of the stories that draws my attention is the story of someone being accused. The woman is brought forward to someone considered to be a master teacher. And they said, "We have found this woman in the art and in the act of adultery. And according to the laws, according to the books which you agree with, we are supposed to stone her." Now, the account of the story says that the master says, or the teacher says, "Well, if any of you is without sin, let him cast the first stone." He turns around and continues to draw on the ground. And eventually, all the men leave one after the other. Interestingly, the account says from the oldest to the youngest, indicating that, you see, every one of us and those of us in this current modern times who is pointing fingers and standing in a seat of judgment, we have our sins. None of us is without sins. And so the way I consider this whole new phenomenon, I would put the same question. He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Now, when I read the account of that story, I was always fascinated by a question which was never asked. The woman was brought forward, caught in the act of adultery. The question I always had in my head and at the back of my mind was, where is the man? Where is the man? Because it takes two, not one. Adultery involves two. And if she was caught in the act, there was a man. Now, what that goes a long way to show was the double standard that has always existed. A double standard that existed back in time. The man was obviously exonerated and considered to be doing what men do. But the woman was the one who had to pay a penalty and therefore the one brought to the master for punishment. Now, the reason I say that is simply because we all have our sins, and none of us is without sin. And so as I go through this series, understand the idea is not to point fingers. I'm starting out very softly, I have to make it clear. But as we progress, I will start to say things that might seem as though it's coming from a place of being judgmental, It isn't. You see, our value system sits in a position of a judge. All I'm doing would be to just talk about ideas and let you choose. Like a buffet, you don't have to have every single meal. You can selectively choose the information that is right for you. I usually say don't reject what you hear, don't neglect, and don't accept on face value. Take the information if you are a woman or if you are a man and ask yourself a simple question. Even if the information is good, the question is not, is the information correct? Is it right? Is it plausible? Or is it the truth? The most important question is, will this information help me get to where I'm trying to get to, my North Star, my goal? If the answer is no, let go of the information. It could be right information, wrong person in terms of where you are in life. Maybe in the future, the information might be right for you. But let me start as follows. I provided something in last session that I thought was useful. I read it out for you because I think this is key as I frame the whole topic, which is choosing the right path. It says the average content creator earns on OnlyFans earns £125 per month. £125 per month. Now, £125 per month will translate to about 1,500 annually. The average content creator. Now, understand average is simply, you might say, you aggregate everyone's and you choose what's supposed to be in the middle. It's not the median, it's not the mean, it's the average. Yes, some of the skewness upsets the whole average number, but average simply says £125 per month. Now, it also says the top creators earn over £83,000 per month. There's a huge difference between the top earners and the average. If the average represents 50% and the top represents the 1%, which is the fat tails of the distribution, there's a huge difference between over £83,000 and £125. I state that to simply point out that I understand the draw, the attractiveness to join the whole OnlyFans phenomenon. It is a high risk, very high reward pursuit. The one part that is left out is the low probability of success. And I'm going to share as I go forward, especially towards the end of today's session, the starting point of how you develop your strategy, whatever that might be, so that you can maximize. If you've come to the point and there is no change in your mind, then I want to make sure you're successful for the long term. I don't want it to be a short-term pursuit. If this is a high risk, high strategy pursuit, then it means only a few will win. Most will lose. I'm not sure if you've paid attention to the thumbnail that I used in today's session. As someone called Eliza Rose Watson, she was on the news, or certainly on Piers Morgan Uncensored, and she has an OnlyFans page. I was drawn to the information because it was sent to me, and it was sent to me as a photograph of a billboard on a street, and I thought this is very, very clever marketing. I mean, exceptional marketing, and I said more power to her. Now, interestingly, she said she earns over £200,000 per month. Now, let's go back to the average and the top earners. The top earners earn £83,000 per month. So she is in the top, perhaps 1% of the top. She makes £200,000 per month. Now compare £200,000 against 125. Again, the reminder, high risk, high reward, low probability of success. Now, one of the reasons I started with a story and I brought in this earning potential on OnlyFans is to simply say, yesterday I was having a conversation with my best friend, and I said to him, as we exchanged messages and the link was sent to me and I was responding and he responded back, I said to him, we can't criticize women. We cannot criticize women without men also being considered as part of the criticism and bearing a larger proportion for the criticism. In other words, You cannot say women should not be on OnlyFans without juxtaposing that position against the fact that there are people who want the content. And the people who want the content are paying as you and I would pay to have an ice cream or to walk into a shop and buy a DVD, or walk into a shop and buy something that satisfies a need, a taste that we have developed or acquired. We cannot criticize the women without criticizing the men. Men, in my opinion, are to blame for this whole issue with OnlyFans and growing to being as big as it is. I hold men responsible. If you've heard me speak about relationships, I hold husbands responsible for the unit. The word husband comes from two words, housebond, the one who bounds the house together. Men are the foundation in every family. The husbands, rather, let me use words more carefully. The husband is the foundation. Men are the foundation in a society. When a society fails, the men are failing. So I don't criticize women for the OnlyFans. Women are simply reacting to a need that exists in the marketplace. And I say, more power to them. It's important to understand that if you accept what I've said so far, that men are equally to blame, and here is perhaps a good, useful example. Going back to the lady in question who earns £200,000 per month, I said to my best friend, I said, I don't blame the women, I blame the man in her example. If she earns £200,000 per month, if you assume that there's a subscription of £5 per month, then it implies that 40,000 men paid £5 each in a single month for her to earn £200,000 per month. If we assume that these men perhaps paid for the first month and they were satiated at the end of 30 days and they decided, we'll move on to someone else or something else. Then at the start of the new month, you had another 40,000 men over the entire month pay again. So over an entire year, you'd have just shy of 500,000 men paying for content, paying for what they consider to be a fair exchange of value. When men exchange money, or when people exchange money, what they're deciding is that the money they have in their hands, though it has some value, the service rendered is either of higher value or equal value, and therefore there is a fair exchange. Now, what this simply means is 480,000 transactions took place by men. Either 40,000 men paid every month for a year, or 480,000 men paid for a monthly experience to see her content. So you cannot criticize the women without recognizing that on the other side, men are encouraging such behavior. Now, why have I brought these two things together? I think this is key, and here is why it is important. If you are starting your journey, let's say you're thinking about starting an account and sharing content, you are going to be selling some form of explicit content. It's important for you to manage the path that you want to choose. To understand that, let me start with, and this is perhaps where today's session really begins. Usually in every session I share, there will be one or two ideas at most. One or two. The first, for today, you have to understand men. That's not a profound statement, but here's where it gets interesting and worthy of consideration. As men, there are some needs that we have, that we are born with. They are innate to us. They are needs that are seasonal. They come with the seasons. And there are needs that we cultivate. We acquire the taste for such or said needs. Let me put it in a different way. There is a need in a man to spread his genes, spread as wide and far as possible. That's based on evolution. We want to ensure the survival of the species. So men generally find women as, forgive me ladies for using this word, sexual objects. We're drawn to beauty. And we look for traits in a woman's physique, in her presence, in her beauty, hips to waist ratio, the size of her lips, the size of her breasts, um, the Fibonacci sequence in terms of symmetry of her face, her height, her weight. All of these things are used as proxies to identify whether she would be the right mate to bring his seed to the next phase of life successfully. Let me segue. Ladies, here's something perhaps you should understand. Men enjoy and like women who are good at kissing, and women with good breasts, and women who enjoy the process of allowing her breasts to be a focus of attention in foreplay for a simple reason. We use that from an evolutionary perspective to determine whether you will be a good mother. One of the reasons, breastfeeding. The more a woman breastfeeds, especially the longer she breastfeeds, the more she's able to produce oxytocin, which is that bonding chemical that allows the mother to love on the child. More importantly, it ensures from a biochemistry, biological, longevity, kids that are breastfed do better over the long term in terms of mental, I won't use the word spiritual, but mental, physical, and more. But from a perspective of kissing, in many ways, a mother that can kiss a child generally is able to transfer some of the good bacteria she has in her system into the baby. For example, it's not unusual for a mother to chew the food first when she starts to wean the child before she feeds the child, sometimes mouth to mouth. A mother sometimes has to suck out if a child has an illness. She has to use her mouth either to suck out whether there's an infection. Men use mouth, breast as a proxy. I come back to today's conversation. Forgive me for the segue. The point of that was simply to say that there are markers. There are things that are innate in a man, and therefore things that a woman can satisfy. My observation is about 70%, slightly more, I'd say between 70 and 75% of a man's needs are those that he was born with. Very basic. We find women attractive and we want sex. Ejaculation comes naturally to most men. There are exceptions, but to most men. And that simply means that in satisfying a man's needs, you can get a distinction as a woman by focusing on his core needs and meeting his core needs. Secondly, there are needs that are seasonal. They come in seasons. I'm going to segue. We are just about to go into the autumn, and next will be winter, and hopefully we get through winter and we come back into the spring and again summer. These are seasons. I was saying to a loved one, it's lovely to see the trees start to change and blossom in a different way as we move into autumn. It marks a change of season. In a man's life, we go through seasons. So for example, a man who is in his 20s is in a season. When he gets to his 30s, he's in a different season. He gets into his 40s and late 40s, he is in a different season. As a man in my position, the needs that I have today were very different to the needs that I had as a younger man in my 30s or in my 20s. As a man moves into his 50s, he's in a different season. So there are needs men have that are seasonal. They come, they go, some return, or some never come back. And there are needs that we acquire through taste, through our imagination, through exposure to new content. For example, if you were to go to a porn website and you look through the genres, what you tend to find is that there are some genres that attract the most views, standard. But there are other genres where at certain times in the year, sometimes influenced by social media, or perhaps influenced by whether that be a social interaction between, say, celebrities. Maybe there's a sex tape that has come out by a known celebrity. Kim Kardashian produces a sex tape, and then suddenly there's an appetite that is developed. It's a season. And therefore, what you then find in the genres that suddenly, from Kim Kardashian, people are looking for other similar types of videos or entertainment. That's a season, and then it comes and it goes. But interestingly, there are needs that are cultivated. It could be an interest in perhaps bondage or something that is kinky. People develop that sometimes from reading 50 Shades of Grey. A good girl who never thought about being handcuffed or kidnapped reads the book and thinks, this might be interesting. That is a taste that you've acquired. The same way that we acquire a taste for sex, or we acquire a taste for alcohol, or we acquire a taste for certain foods. We develop a palate. There are times when men develop certain tastes. The reason I've spent some time talking about needs and the importance of a woman, if you are a lady who is starting this OnlyFans phenomenon, or you are already in that process, the importance of understanding the need is because there is an end client on the other side. And you have to understand who men are. I would even say this in this particular junction. It is important, women, to recognize that your beauty alone doesn't guarantee success. There are so many women on OnlyFans sharing their content and not producing the desired result. The desired result recognizing that has to do with the earnings or the number of subscribers, which is correlated with the earnings you make. There is a good reason for that. Beauty alone does not get the job done. Hence, understanding the man's needs. As a matter of fact, I would say women have to learn how to learn the art of seduction. Go and study Helen of Troy, Cleopatra, Marilyn Monroe, to understand how these women used not just their beauty, but their feminine energy, and the ability to tease, to seduce, to role play, and change a man's perception, and even cause wars to be fought in the case of Helen of Troy, simply because the man was mesmerized by the women. The women who were making money on OnlyFans are not those who were doing very explicit content like porn or having sex or multiple sex partners. No, you will find, and the data suggests this to be accurate, that most of these women are not really sharing too much explicit stuff. And that simply means often less is more. Brings me to the second point of today's session. Ladies, less is more. Start slow. The reason I suggest that you start slow is that it's not unusual to find that you start your content. Let me use myself as a good example. And here's a criticism on my part, so you can understand that this is coming from a logically sound, rational place. When I started teaching, and I have been teaching now for decades, but when I started teaching, my aim was never to be the biggest or to have the biggest platform. My aim was simply that I found value by learning from other people's mistakes, and I found good teachers and mentors who were willing to pour into my life. And I felt that there was an obligation, a duty, a responsibility to do likewise. So it was a joy, a passion, you might say an avocation when I started. It wasn't about generating content based on subscribers. It was about me sharing ideas, some of which I understood would not be right in hindsight, but they held a position based on how I was thinking. And the idea was, if I could help one person make that journey and avoid the mistakes that I made, then I was happy. So if you look at my number of subscribers, you find I will fall within the average of people. Let me take that back. I will fall below average. Someone who has very little subscribers, whilst there are people who have millions and millions of subscribers, we're not equal. The same thing applies to OnlyFans. Here's the big difference. I share knowledge, and I come every day and I try to share something new because it gives me a sense of purpose, meaning, fulfillment, and joy and peace. It's almost as though it's a calling and a duty. I'm not suggesting that you cannot have the same, or you shouldn't have the same, or you should have the same position with regards to content creation. What I'm simply saying is that if the pursuit of money to be able to monetize my subscriber base or the ability to have a high number of subscribers so I could call myself an influencer, if that was my pursuit, I wouldn't have almost 1,000 videos produced over many years, recognizing that I still have currently a pitiful 201 subscribers, much of which in the last 2 weeks I have gained about 20. So for a significant part of my my content production phase or life, as you might call it, I've had less than 170 subscribers, or followers, as it's called. Well, Jesus had 12. One of them sadly betrayed him, so 11 was good enough. So I keep consoling myself in the fact that, well, yeah, I'm not doing too bad. The point of this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the point of the conversation is to simply say, in the session I did yesterday, I made reference to your why. What is your purpose? What is the drive? I also made reference to the goal you have. What is the goal? What is the North Star? What is your true north? How would you know when you've arrived? In my case, I never put a number on that. So I do not measure failure or success using the standard procedures. And I said I have to achieve 1 million subscribers by 2024. You can see I would be very, very unhappy currently. And I would consider myself to have failed if I don't achieve that goal. But because I did not place an undue burden, and because I understood my why and my goal at the time when I started was to reach one person. And that was satisfactory from my perspective. Now, I bring this back to you to simply say, understanding the man's needs and understanding the art of seduction and recognizing the high risk, high reward, low probability of success. The use of explicit content, though tempting, may not be the best. I have actually been told that what tends to happen, and this is no different for those who produce content, you start off producing a certain type of content, but you're not generating the leads or the interest that you want. So you, in your desire to draw attention, recognizing, let me use myself as a good example. My biggest problem is obscurity. People do not know who I am. And it means I haven't got people's attention yet. So in order to get attention, you have to do something that generates some form of curiosity and that keeps people. So sometimes you'll find people do things that are not necessarily consistent with their values to generate interest, to break the back of obscurity, and then to draw an audience to them. And once they have the audience, they pivot back to their core message. I found using OnlyFans, what young girls are doing is you start off thinking because you are attractive, and if you put on a camera and say happy, 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 that will produce money. And after a few months, you realize you're not producing content, and you cannot rationalize how you're better looking than the girl making the most, and you're better looking than most of the top earners, but you're not making enough. And so what you do is you ratchet up your content production. So it starts to become from explicit level 1 to 2 to 3, and suddenly at some point, you never intended to produce sex tapes, but now you're producing porn, primarily because your expectations were not met. Adaptability, and here is lesson number 3, and here I bring this to a close. I've given you 3 lessons now. Lesson number 3, adaptability should not be a lifestyle on OnlyFans. You can adapt, but you should do so very rarely. Someone once said to me, my mentor said, in every relationship, if you have to compromise, if you have to keep adapting and keep changing to meet the other party's needs, then it's a sign that you are the wrong person for that person, and certainly that the relationship is not for both of you. That generally speaking, about 70% of who you are should be acceptable. Hence, needs we are born with as men, needs that are seasonal, needs that we develop a taste or we acquire a taste for. On OnlyFans, we are seeing women who are changing every single day. They're adapting every day, either because the demand of the men is changing based on a season or based on a developed acquired taste, and because the women have not set a boundary of performance, of what they would accept or who they would change into. What we're finding is that most women are losing themselves, are having an identity crisis, because you start off on Monday as someone, but because either you are generating wealth, making money, and the demands of your clients are coming through and requests, can you do this? Can I see this? It goes from them wanting to see you to them wanting to see part of you in a certain way, or them wanting to see certain things that you own, whether those be your knickers, or whether those be parts of your house or home, or you in strange places. You're constantly trying to adapt to meet the needs. And those needs represented seasonal or cultivated tastes. And what that does is it helps you put yourself in a position where a crisis of identity is guaranteed, because you're trying to change every single day. As I bring this to a close, let me share something that I think is key and will help you understand this. If you're going to go into OnlyFans and produce explicit content, sexual content, first of all, you have to choose an identity to play. You have to see yourself as an actress or an actor. That's the first. You have to separate yourself from the role. That's the second. You have to choose your limits. I'll give you a good example. Daniel Day-Lewis, a British actor, in my opinion, one of my favorites, and in most people's opinions who understand movies and drama and cinematography, is considered to be amongst the greatest. Daniel Day-Lewis retired from acting some years ago. One of the reasons, for those who are not familiar with him, he did The Last of the Mohicans. He did films such as Lincoln. He did, I think, American Gangsters. He's done a number of films. I mean, a phenomenal actor. Good-looking man, phenomenal actor. But I was fascinated by a statement made by his wife at the time, who said that it takes him 6 months at the end of the movie production phase and the recording phase for her to get her husband back. 6 months. The reason? Daniel Day-Lewis was so gifted and was so into his acting career that he took on the identity of the role he was playing. He had to play, to quote a great person who once said, I became him. I acted like him for so long that I became him. Or I acted like her for so long that I became her. Daniel Day-Lewis would take the script and he would see himself as that script, that person, the role he is playing. He didn't see himself as Daniel. He was a different person. So in his psyche, he changed. And then he played the parts so well, it was so obvious. We look at the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and all the other great actors, men, and we think these are great people. If you go back in time and you sit down, go back 20 years, and you ask and look at interviews that were done by some of the best actors, Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, and all the other good ones who were relatively young, and ask them, who was the hero? Who was the person who you envied? Everyone envied Daniel Day-Lewis. Whenever there was a script of significance, it was given to Daniel first. It was not mentioned to any other actors. Daniel always had the right of refusal first. The best producers came to Daniel first because he was so exceptional. And if he rejected the role, everyone else in Hollywood and in the movie industry knew that Daniel had rejected the role. They were all second place. Because for him, it wasn't acting, he was living the part. 6 months it took for him to come back to himself at the end of the recording. The point being, you heard me say, choose a role, choose an act. See yourself as a stage performer so that you can separate your identity, who is your real person as a woman, from the role you're playing. Because, again, high risk, high reward, low probability of success, and also short-lived. You're going to have to play a part or an act or a role, recognizing that this too shall pass. And what you're looking to do is achieve that goal you have in mind and exit stage left at the right moment. Go back to Chuck Prince. Musical chairs. At some point you have to stop dancing. The music's too loud. It's about 11 p.m. You've had enough drinks. It's time to leave. The point being, choose a role. You're going to play an act, but the sad part of this recommendation is whether you choose to play a role or choose an act, or you don't, there's still the risk of a crisis of identity at some point in the future. Hence, in the session I did previously, I said, identify your why, identify your target, and identify the gap. And make peace with yourself. One of the things I left you with in the session I did previously was, you're going to need a pathway back to love. Do not take the pathway of burning all the bridges and all the boats with all the relationships you have currently, in the hope that this will be successful. Even if it is successful, what if you gain the whole world and lost your soul? So there will be allowance. You have to allow some pathway back to love, whether that be your parents, your friends, your siblings, your loved ones, or society. I left you with, and I think this is perhaps why I should summarize today's session. I left you with a poem in yesterday's session. And I before I go through the last paragraph in that poem, let me say this. When you decide the act you want to play, it will affect you. You might be better, you might be worse, but you will never be the same. But here's the key part of a litmus test to keep in mind. It's called the sleep well test. Can you sleep well at night? And whenever you choose the sleep well test, in other words, whatever act you play and role you play and choice you make, do you sleep well? Be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. Now this brings me to the last paragraph of the poem I shared yesterday, and it says, beyond the wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have every right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations in this noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful and strive to be happy. I'll bring today's session to a close. And as I go into tomorrow's session, or the next session, I'm going to start providing strategies, tactical steps that women can take, but also strategies to ensure that, not that you're successful, I would like you to be successful in other ways, but to ensure you have a pathway back. I hope today's session has been useful.